Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm playing in the tier 10 Italian heavy tank. It is the Rinoceronte. This is a vehicle which, when I first played the vehicle, I absolutely hated the tank. However, I found that when I got everything on the vehicle, it actually started to make it a lot more playable, and I'm talking about the field mods specifically. There's a field mod, the penultimate field mod to be exact with this vehicle, that actually improves the tank's rate of fire by 3%. It does sacrifice some of the reverse speed on this vehicle, but seeing how I use a turbo on this vehicle, along with vertical stabilizers and vents to further improve just about everything on the vehicle, it kind of is okay to lose that top speed. Now, on most of my tier 10 heavy tanks, I elect to take the reverse speed actually over the firepower. Think about a tank like the Kranvang, for example. A vehicle which, while it kind of needs a little bit of the rate of fire now, considering the nerfs, it's not really a tank which I feel that I'm worried about the actual reload. It's more about the fact that you're unloading effectively, and you can't improve the intra-clip reload. So sacrificing a few seconds, or a second and a half, I believe, on the Kranvang, on your reload, to be able to have that, I think it's 3 kilometers an hour backwards, is absolutely massive. Now, with the Rinoceronte, if you elect to take the 3% rate of fire, it's not so much, it's actually a much bigger deal on this tank because of the fact that it's an auto reloader. And so the tank isn't so much about its intra-clip, it's about sometimes hanging on for long enough to be able to deliver the shell without interrupting your reload and losing all of that progress that you had towards the next shell. Now, of course, the Rinoceronte, as you can see, it does have a compensation mechanic as it's an Italian auto-reloading heavy tank. So if you fire early, you actually get a reduced reload on the shell that you kind of wasted, in a way, by firing. But one of the things that also I found that having that extra 3% DPM on this tank enabled me to do was to hang on for that little bit of extra time, and it didn't feel nearly as punishing to not actually have to go into the magazine and subsequently not have to absolutely trash your DPM. So you now might be thinking, like, why didn't you QB fire there? Well, it's because I'm trying to hold the rounds so that I'm not actually going too deep into the magazine where my DPM might be not enough to be able to actually get through the scenario. And that's because the reload on this tank, even if you have the field mod on it, is actually, it's 15.23 as soon as you've got the field mod, or I'll talk about the base values. 15.7 on your first round, 17 on your second round, and 20 seconds on your third round. It's absolutely disgusting. But by hanging on, remaining as calm as you can be, you can actually keep the DPM of this vehicle at a reasonable level. And so we've done a fairly decent amount of damage in the first 3 minutes. 3,000 is not a small amount. And we've still got our magazine fully loaded to hopefully keep the fight going. And also to be able to react to bad situations, like a missed shell, a chancy shot on the WZ-111-14, or the one against the 257 about half a minute ago, where he actually ended up going up a slope when I thought he'd be going down a slope, and so he actually managed to avoid me hitting his lower plate altogether with the shell going a little bit too high. It also protects you for if the enemies go all in against you, and if they're aggressive, and then you've actually got the shells to be able to dissuade them from attacking. And quite often people aren't stupid at tier 10, and if they see that you fired your 3 shots, then they're going to all in you. However, this is when bad DPM gets worse, and also why you shouldn't reverse up a slope this way to try and shoot a tank over there, because then they're going to have an easy shot into your turret armor. However, I decided that we can play like a full-in autoloader as well. While it's going to make our DPM absolutely horrendous, I felt like we had to try and push out of this pincer play as the enemy was starting to gain ground. And so by making an aggressive play against the mouse, noticing that they'd fired a shell, we're actually able to finish them off and hopefully bail this 257 out of a bad situation. And also, because we've got that third shell, we're also a threat to this VZ-51, but why not just chill there and just get stronger? No need to come around the corner and lower our DPM and not have the extra shell loaded in the tank. And that means that by holding on and avoiding this WZ-111-14, who really seem to want to get me, but luckily it looks like they're using the stock gun there as they're unable to finish the 257, we keep the extra 2 rounds in, which hopefully will be enough to save the 257, and just about managed to get there. But it looks like the enemy 111-14 is having a bit of a mare as they manage to actually miss. And so, while I definitely didn't play perfectly in this engagement, hopefully it will help a few of you out there who are struggling with this tank, maybe playing it like a traditional autoloader where you just dump out your rounds and then you never have the DPM to actually be able to get back into the game. And so there's a couple of things that I found made this tank actually playable for me and ended up massively increasing my average damage and my combines enough so I could get a 3 mark, but also improving my win ratio in this tank. And that would be the premium consumable. A bit of a cop-out here, but I feel like if you're going to use a premium consumable on any tank, this is one that I would thoroughly recommend it. Because that premium consumable will reduce the reload on your shells by 5%, because that's how crew skill scales. 10% crew skill will be 5% to all of the aspects of your tank. Next, it would be to use vents on this vehicle as well, because the 6% crew skill you get from putting a standard vent inside a slot, or better yet, if you were to put a bounty or a bond on this tank, you could reduce the reload by 3% up to actually 4.25% if you're using a bond turbo. Sorry, not bond turbo, but bond vents. And then the final module would be that penultimate field mod to further improve the reload by 3%. And all of these DPM buffs really stack up on this tank. And it allowed me to be a lot more controlled with when I thought was the right time to fire the shells and when was not the right time. Now, whenever you make a decision in World of Tanks, you're making a decision about the best way that you're making a guess, right? It's an educated guess, hopefully, and the better educated your guesses are, the better they're going to be, right? But you can't be right all the time, and so quite often I'll end up either firing a shell, or maybe even just not firing a shell and holding on for the DPM. And there were a couple of times in that last engagement, especially when I had that lower plate of the WZ-111, if you might have noticed, underneath the tank, where in retrospect, where I'm watching this replay back, I think it would have probably been better to fire there and then just hang for the extra 5 to 10 seconds to be able to get the reload penalty. And remember, with the compensation mechanic, it's not the end of the world if you do fire a little bit early on this tank. Okay, so now that I've talked about optimizing the Rinoceronte and how I effectively managed to turn this tank from being a bit of a stinker to being not a disaster, I guess, for me on my account, let's focus on this endgame scenario here. And that is that somehow my team has managed to turn what looked like a super simple game into now a complete disaster. And I think a lot of it was because the enemy took very strong defensive locations, the STRV-103B and the CS-63 holding that position down. And also this FE-405 seems to clap absolutely everybody who makes their way up towards them. We can see there's a Foch 155 on our team who's going up the slope with 800 hit points, and I'm hoping that they're going to be able to put at least one shell into the FE-405, who is currently on half of their hit points. Okay, so I snuck up. I wanted to close the distance, and oh no, he doesn't. The FE-405 is having a hero's result here, and we're actually down by nearly 1,000 hit points. So this game is now getting too close for comfort. It really shouldn't have been this close. All right, we've got our work cut out for us. Okay, so let me talk about this endgame situation here. I slinkied my way as close to my opponents as I possibly could, snaking my way through this area here. However, then the STRV-103B showed how well they're doing, and unfortunately that is a painful bounce off what looked like the upper part of the STRV-103B. We've run out of our APCR rounds here, which is kind of awkward, because if I had APCR, I could actually fire straight through the space protection of the STR-103B, right between the gun or alternatively in the lower plate. Now I've got heat, which isn't going to be so good against the upper hull, but will still do well against the lower plate. And it's one of the advantages of having this big caliber gun. The 127mm on the Rinoceronte is that you're able to overmatch so many plates. But of course, now with only heat left in this tank, we aren't really able to overmatch. So I wanted to advance forwards, get close to my gun line to allow my team to be able to push through. But oh, stressful moment there as we finally managed to dig out the tier 10 Swedish tank destroyer on the enemy team, and worried about the FE-405 maybe blind firing me here. I'm also going to have a go at them there. Firing early doesn't really matter because we can see the CS-63 is in the lower part of the map, and the FE-405 claims yet another victim, finishing off the 257 on our team that we helped earlier against the 111. Okay, so one thing I'd like to clarify is that when we ducked in here, I was going to sneak around and go after the CS63. Then they decided to leave the STRV, which meant that the play was actually to sneak back and to isolate the STRV. It's all about, if they have multiple tanks camping in one situation, you always want to try and create a pincer. However, if somebody is able to be isolated, you should just go at them with your friends. And what is up with this CS63? They seem to be everywhere, and every time I'm making a cheeky play, they seem to be there, finding out what I'm doing. So great play by the CS63. Good bombshells from the FV405. They're doing a great job of making this one stressful. So in this scenario, I'm actually going to reload my high explosive rounds on this vehicle, and that is because they have a whopping 640 alpha damage and great penetration as well. Now, they're not going to be so useful against the CS63. Don't panic, by the way, here with a bit of water. Yeah, not going to drown myself in this scenario. But it's really about having the alpha damage to guarantee that I can take out the FV405 in 2 shells without possible low rolls. So I'm going to tell the Jagdpanzer to fall back here because I don't want them to go in by themselves. And you'll see that traversing along this part is perfectly possible. All you have to do is stay low. The worst thing you could do is go high, because if you go high, and it's what your brain wants to do, you think like, well, if I go high, I've got more space to be able to go along. No, you'll slip off the slope and then you'll go so deep that it's impossible to come back. As long as you literally target just above the water line, and then you alternate between A and D while holding your W key, you will be able to sneak your way along there, irrelevant of whatever tank you play. And by doing that, it stopped the CS63 and the FV405 from having that kill zone that would have been up from this area to this area. But I tell the Jagdpanzer 100 that I'm going to help them now, and hopefully we can manage to shut them down. And luckily for me, the CS63 isn't spotting me in the side, but that means that the CS63 could be anywhere in this scenario. So surely there must be a barn up here. How can it possibly be hiding? Where could it be? And there it was, right there. We managed to hit the FV405 once, and we're going to hit them again with the HESH round there, or the high explosive round, which has the higher penetration. And I'm really happy that I fired those HE rounds there, because we needed over 1,000 damage to be able to shut them down in that situation. And if we'd been using the AP round, it might not have been so good. We might have had to fire 3 rounds, and maybe they'd still be alive, so good reload there. Another thing you might notice is, why did you fire that HESH round at the bush there? Well, it's another tip, and rewind the video if you want to see exactly. But if you dab your 2 key once, actually, you know what, I'll just rewind the video and then I can show you myself. It might mess up the outlines, but at least it will show you. So I have to rewind it again, unfortunately, and I'll explain this in great detail because it's well, we'll get to see the FV405 kill again. It'll be a good one. All right, so if you've got 1 shell loaded in your Italian auto reloaders, if you dab the key of the shell that you want to load to once, and then you fire just before, like now, then you'll actually get the reload compensation while being able to switch the shell. So do you notice how that high explosive anti-tank shell didn't take the 20 seconds, well, with cruise skills, about 15 seconds that it would take to reload. Instead, we actually managed to get it into the tank in 5 seconds. So it's an opportunity for you, and it's a very small window of opportunity to be able to switch your shells cost effectively with your Italian auto-reloading heavy tanks. So you can either switch to an APCR shell if you know that you're going to get to shoot a lightly armored tank, so maybe even switch to a HESH shell or an HE shell if that's what you need to be able to have the extra alpha damage to finish off the next tank. So little micro advantages there. And it might have made the difference if the CS63 rushed me in that scenario as well. I might have needed the 2 shells as well as the 268 version 4 to get through this. Alright, so I'm going to fire at the bush there, and the reason why I'm firing at the bush there was because I wanted to see if he spotted me. However, seeing that the CS63 is now spotted, and with 2 minutes left on the game, I feel like I've got to advance them. I'm going to wait until I'm no longer spotted, and then when I'm no longer spotted, I'm going to progress. I'm asking the 268 version 4 to help me here, and now it's a case of, well, we're going to have to trade. And then, luckily for me, the 268 version 4 puts a big old shell into the CS63 as well. In this kind of a scenario, it's all about getting close quarters so you can proxy spot the medium. The last thing that you want to do is allow the medium tank to escape, because if the medium tank escapes, then they're going to be able to get flanking play. And if they got to the back of the map and used the bushes, there's no way I'm going to be able to dig them out. So in this scenario, it's just all about me proxy spotting the CS63 so that I can allow my 268 version 4 to advance towards the enemy tank. In this situation, I actually make a bit of a misplay. I think I should have been more on this corner, and I should have policed him to stop him from being able to get my friend. I'm actually going to fire a chancy shell there against the upper hull of the CS-63, knowing perfectly well that the turbo will get me backwards fast enough, even with the field mod sacrifice that I've made to the reverse speed, and it's tense right now. All I have to do is hold this corner and just make sure that I don't die. As long as the 268 version 4 comes and helps, I should be fine. And even though I had what looked like a 50-50 shell at the front of the CS-63, I'm not going to take it, because I know that I want to make sure that we attack at the same time and we finish off the CS-63, secure the top gun, get that 6,000 damage, and take down a close carry in a very exciting game, and one that really, it shouldn't have been this close. But it was, and it's about getting through those scenarios with your teammates. And in the post-game, I whispered the Jagdpanzer E100, who made that valiant sacrifice against the FE405 at the end, couldn't have done it without you. To get through this situation, we managed to finally get rid of a vehicle who had been taking out, creating a whole graveyard around them, and also messaged the 268 version 4 for the awesome teamwork that we had. And yeah, I loved this game. It was a real feels-good round. It was one of those rounds where you just feel as if the battle's slipping away from you, partly because of great plays by the enemy team, but also partly because our team was hyper-throwing. And it's always something that I've loved about the Italian auto-reloaders, is how flexible they are in a situation because of having the most flexible gun in the game, which has to be an auto-reloader. Kind of all of the benefits of being able to dump out the damage and threaten your opponents and take those chancy shots against the CS-63, but having the threat that he doesn't want to come around the corner against you, but also being able to just hold tight and get stronger and force your opponents to have to come after you in the situation. However, before all of you jump in to Rinoceronte gameplay and think it's the new best tier 10 heavy tank, also keep in mind that this vehicle is still performing worse even than the nerfed Kranvang, and substantially below what the AMX-50B is about. But yeah, it definitely is superior to the T-57 Heavy. So an ace tanker here for our 1,382 base experience, and we get a high caliber for our 366 damage. But keep in mind that seeing how I've already run out of consumables, I make a 22,000 credit loss because we had to start wasting those heat rounds. It's not normal for a Rinoceronte to stay alive long enough to be able to dump out all of this ammunition, nor is it normal for this tank to have to drive 4 kilometers to be able to do so. Nevertheless, this was a real fun game, which showed every aspect of Rinoceronte gameplay that you will have to master if you want to be successful in this tank. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it goes live on Friday, it's time for some new drops to be able to get those tokens to get closer to getting a QuickyBaby commander for free. So feel free to come along right now on Twitch. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.